Welcome to the first of my quarantine lectures. It was a joke that I had with my wife, and we decided let's run with it since we're stuck indoors. So I hope to be able to provide an insight into some bits of history, things that I find interesting. So it won't all be medieval or armour related, but probably in all likelihood most of it will be. Also, it should help me stop going insane with being stuck indoors all the time by giving me something different to do other than gardening. So today I thought I'd take a look, because I've just built some, at the English armour, in particular the Spaulder and what they came up with at the top of the armour up here on the shoulder. It's not uniquely English. I've no idea who invented it, whether it was an Englishman or not, we're not told that. You can see them all round. Spaulders certainly is a separate piece, so what we're talking about here is this bit, and its lames here just at the top of the rear brace. So separate Spaulders, so you can see this one's attached, it's integrated. Separate Spaulders are seen all over the show. Integrated Spaulders certainly through Northern Europe, mostly I'm thinking France, and then almost exclusively in England, where they certainly run the majority, I think, of what we can see in effigies and so on. Certainly by the later 14th century. And we hang on to them for quite a while. We're sort of late adopters, I think, in some respect, of some of the pauldrons and things that seem to come up through Italy and so on. But, you know, I haven't made exhaustive studies of this, so I could have that bit wrong. So, the Spaulder itself, what I've got is I've got two arms here, I've just completed for a customer. So you can see here the solution is quite straightforward. It's basically just an articulated joint with protection for the forearm and upper arm there with the van brace and the rear brace. And this is the bit that we're going to take a look at, the Spaulder here. You can see it's got a couple of movements in what it does. It articulates that way a bit, so it comes down onto the top of the shoulder. It's got a rotation, which I think is of vital importance as to why they did this, and it has a compression. The leathers on this are still quite new, but you can see there's a compression. So, I'll put that one to the side because I've deliberately left this one unfinished. So what I can do, while we're chatting, is I can take, I hope, the rear brace off. So I'll get this taken away, and then we'll close in. Oh, that's not playing. We'll close in and take a proper look at the Spaulder, its construction, and what I think it was used for. For those of you that haven't seen armour before, and obviously this bit here is going to have a nice decoration over it, which is why it's a bit rough like this. I love particularly the 14th century, early 15th century. Generally, if something wasn't going to be seen, like this one won't because it'll be covered with a disc later, it's often left really rough. Rather than finishing it, I've left it deliberately rough from the cutting and so on, because I think it's a much better representation of 14th century craftsmanship. Now you can see here I've left these nuts and bolts in place so that I can take it apart for the video. Obviously they would be riveted, but nuts and bolts for the moment. For those who haven't seen armour before, and what it does, it's basically a shell articulation. So by that, it's a rigid defence, so it's steel as opposed to the rings of mail that you see on a lot of earlier armours. This is now being replaced by rigid plate defence, which they're gaining confidence in. This is often an augmentation to begin with to mail defence, and then gradually this becomes the principal defence, and mail is then left into these little areas here that they can't get articulations in at this time. In time they sort that out. Henry VIII has a wonderful suit, three fantastic suits in the Royal Armouries which show shell articulation or rigid plate defence over every square inch of his body. It's a fantastic feat of engineering. But anyway, what I've done is I've undone this so that we can take it apart. So you can see here we have the rear brace and Spaulder, which we'll be concentrating on, and here we have the van brace and the elbow or the cooter. You see it just basically articulates by opening and closing. If I can get some light in there, not really, but if I look at it from the outside, you can see how it works. Yeah, and a little bit of compression that way, just to ease it through the movement. There would be a strap coming out of here, but I haven't done that yet because I've got to cover them in velvet. And I'm doing that whilst I'm in my isolation. So anyway, the van brace and the cooter there, perhaps we'll do something looking at those on another day. So here we go. The rear brace and the Spaulder. You can see the Spaulder wants to lay across the top because that's where the shoulder is coming in there. And as decoration, this isn't, it's typical of the period, but it's not exclusive to the period. As decoration, often shown on the lower lame here. These three things are the lames that allow for some of the movement we're going to look at. Often as decoration on that one because the male coif, so a neck piece, comes down and often cuts across the shoulder here. So you see a lot of decoration on this lower lame, sometimes on the top one, sometimes on the upper one, and occasionally over all three. But from what I've seen, mostly the decoration is on this bottom one because that is what we'll be seeing most of the time when the man is wearing his armour. And he wants to look good because this stuff would have cost him a fortune. And he's a young man, so he wants to pose a lot. So we have the rear brace at the top here. I don't know what it actually means, but if you think of rear guard, rear brace, it's the back one. So you have the van brace or the van brace at the vanguard at the front on the forearm, the elbow, and then the rear brace back here. Brace, I believe, means armour. means armour. And the bit we're looking at is the Spaulder, typically referred to in most circles today as the English Spaulder or shoulder. By that we mean it's integrated, it's directly attached to the rear brace. It is not a separate beast that comes on and off. You see variations on this. The Italians a bit later wear quite large ones that come down to here. The French seem to have these, but they seem to have an elongated rear brace that goes up under the Spaulder quite often, and then this might be floating, as in not attached, I don't know. But in this case we can see it's attached there. Hopefully we can get some light in there. There we go. We can see it's attached by a series of 3 straps and some nails that are holding it there. And what that allows for is it allows for a good bit of movement in here. Particularly as this leather softens up, it hangs nicely, and then when you need the compression, rather than snapping to it like it does now, it just folds to where it has to go. I don't know what the development was behind this. There was no centralised R&D back in the day. Everyone just sort of got on with it, and what worked gradually gained an acceptance, and what didn't work fell off, I guess because the guy got killed or didn't like it, and when I spoke to his armourer and got it sorted out. But a couple of points I like about the rear brace that you see on a lot of the effigies. I'll try and put some pictures up on these, maybe over here. There we go. I'll keep over this way a bit so I can get some pictures up. What you tend to find with a lot of these Spaulders is there's a gap here. Sometimes it's scalloped, other times it's quite small, but generally there's a gap here. I think that's a compression because underneath this the chap's wearing a hauberk, more than likely, or some sleeves, or maybe even just some mail bits and pieces. So what a hauberk is kind of like a large shirt or vest of mail. The sleeves are where they're working out. Now we don't need the stuff in the body because we've got plate defence on there, so they've just got a sleeve of mail there. And you see the scallop, and I think that's really important at this stage because this is so close fitting, unlike the later pauldrons which sit on top of the whole movement here. Because this is so form-fitting, when you do a compression and you move, all of that mail has to have an outlet. It has to be able to go somewhere. If you had that rigidly across here, I think it restricts the movement. Although at least that's what they're going for at the moment. So by having that there, you can do all of these sorts of movements, and the mail has got somewhere to break out into if it needs it, and a slightly larger one at the back there. So that's what that scallop is for there. At least this is all what I think. There's no book left to us. They didn't leave us any videotapes or podcasts about this sort of stuff, so we're just guessing and going from what we've seen. So that's what I think that's for. The top of the shoulder tends to sit here. It's not here. That's not just sat perched on the edge of your shoulder. If you do that and you get struck, you're going to be in real pain. But equally, what you don't want is that to return too far over. Because if that was like that and you're then struck straight onto flesh of the shoulder, that is going to cause you an absolute mischief. It has to lay across the shoulder, so if it's struck, this edge doesn't interfere too badly. The lames themselves, I think these 3 things here, the lames, I don't know what that stands for. I'm sure it's probably some sort of Latin or something which explains what the word lame means. If anyone knows, that'd be great. But what I think these 3 plates here do is we've had a rear brace for a long time without this on top, and that's been augmenting mail. And then they've started to experiment with shoulder pieces, and now they're trying to draw the 2 together. I think this was an early way of attempt at drawing these together that worked quite well. It's not very long, It's not very large like this. You just don't need that sort of down there. And also you've got all this strength in there. And the arm tends to move quite well when it's struck. So don't change this because this bit wasn't broken, and just figure out how to get them together. And this, I think, was a very straightforward solution. When you're waving a sword about and you're trying to rotate it to sort of get some sort of backswing, I will see if I can get some video footage or something of somebody doing that here. But when you're rotating your arm backwards like this, the rotation comes from the shoulder. It's a big movement from the shoulder. And if you've got a solid steel piece up here, this bit, your arm, your upper arm, or your bicep and your tricep arm, have got to rotate through that plane. But your shoulder can't go with it. It needs to stay where it is, stay as a fixed point. So what I think these lames allow you to do is all that torque and pull that's coming in down here. I'll just attach this for the moment. So imagine we're trying to do the, hang on, let's use the one I haven't taken to pieces. We're on the left arm now. But imagine we have the chap here and he's pulling all of this back to shoot that down into an attack. This has to be able to go. So imagine his shoulder and back are in here. If that's just a solid piece, he's ice cream scooping out of the back of his shoulder there and coming back with that explosive force. So what I think these lames enabled them to do was offer very strong protection to the scrawn of the shoulder, because these can be made from thinner material, but they're overlapping, which is making them considerably stronger than one piece. But what they allow is, as he brings his arm back in that rotation, they allow that rotation for the shoulder to remain as a fixed point. You can see there. If we just do it on the lames, because obviously this is moving quite well, but just on the lames themselves, there we go. You can see how they are allowing that small movement to go there, so you don't lose any of this protection, and then the bigger part of the movement can be completed by the shoulder itself. So you can see from this movement here, look, almost out to 90 degrees. A fantastic piece of engineering that they came up with. Also, when you lift your arm up, there we go, we use this chap again. When you shrink your shoulder in and lift your arm up, it has to be able to compress. The armour itself, your shoulder doesn't, obviously. Oh, hello, moving the camera, sorry about that. Your shoulder doesn't have to compress, you can't shrink it in. You can lift your trap up a bit, but you can't make it smaller necessarily. But the armour itself has to be able to now move into a smaller space. So what this does, by having this large gap here, rather than just riveting it like these ones are all together, by having this large gap there, it enables that compression to be able to take place in all directions as is needed. Couple that with the rotation movement and you've got the full range of the human shoulder covered in steel. So it was a fantastic innovation that these guys came up with such rudimentary materials, 3 straps of leather and a dozen nails. Amazing, really. So there you go, a brief look, I hope, because I haven't been timing it, a brief look at the English shoulder, or the English Spaulder of the mid to late and early 14th century and early 15th century, really, and then it starts to sort of disappear out. So I hope that wasn't too boring. I shall try and find some more entertaining ways of doing this later. We'll see what we can do, but I'm going to try and do one a day and see what happens. I'll probably fall at the first hurdle, but I shall do my level best not to. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Spread the word, because it's stopping me from going insane, and I will see you tomorrow on the second lecture.